What is the weirdest thing you ever witnessed? I answered the wrong phone, in the wrong house, and got the right person. Let me explain. I used to do computer repair work in high school. This was back in the days of the modem, which was a device that connected to your phone line. My boss complained that his modem was dead, and as was standard procedure of the time, I connected a phone to the modem to check for a dial tone. Almost immediately, the phone rang. This is odd, since his phone line isn't published, and never has a phone connected to it. So, I figured it was going to be a wrong number and answered it. As soon as I picked it up and said hello, I got "Hey, user 1539. It's Rob. You want to come to the mall to see a movie with me tonight?" I asked how did you get this number, and he explained that he didn't know I was at work, and dialed, he thought, my home phone number. He must have misdialed my home phone number, and accidentally keyed in the number for a phone that's never connected. At my job, where I happened to be testing the line at that very second, he dialed the wrong number, got the wrong phone, and got the right person. The chances of that must be astronomical. One time I was driving through Nevada, probably about 30 minutes before Vegas. My friend and I were headed to Utah from California, and needed a bathroom break, so we stopped at some gas station for a minute. While we were in the bathroom, 4 FedEx delivery employees in their full uniforms came walking in, and all 4 piled into one bathroom stall, without a word being spoken. Also, not a sound in the stall. My friend and I looked at each other and speed walked out, barely able to contain our laughter. Once we were outside, there was no FedEx vehicle in sight. I really have no idea what the explanation for that was. See break. I was driving down the freeway and traffic came to a sudden stop. Up ahead were half a dozen police cruisers. We slowly filed past in the inside emergency lane and a number of officers were behind their doors, weapons drawn. As I get closer I see one officer running for his life looking scared shitless. What had a dozen trained cops so on edge? A freaking goat. The cops were trying to wrangle a goat that had escaped from the adjacent field. Somehow I wish all traffic jams ended that way. Guess they weren't kidding around. One night I woke up unexpectedly and noticed red and blue strobes seeping in through my curtains. I looked out the window and there was a pair of police squad cars blocking the intersection in front of my house. I looked around the neighborhood from inside my house, and could see the next 2 closest intersections were blocked off. 2. If I stared long enough I could make out red and blue strobes coming from a 4th intersection in my neighborhood. So I sat in my living room, watching 7 or 8 squad cars, blocking 4 intersections with their lights on, but no sirens. I watched them for an hour waiting for something to happen. After an hour of boredom I couldn't take it anymore and I went back to bed. There was nothing reported in the papers. There was nothing on Nextdoor. There was nothing I could find on the internet. It was like it didn't happen. Police run drills like this a lot, or it's something they covered up and filed it as a drill. Either way, not terribly uncommon. I once saw a completely naked lady standing in the kitchen of a restaurant, with several of the employees just standing there cooking, like she wasn't even standing there, and the kitchen wasn't even hidden. There was a big window from the dining area where anyone could look in. To this day I still have no clue as to what the frick was going on in that kitchen. First day in my new duplex. It's snowing. Coming down hard. Already snowed 4 inches. Someone drives up in a beat up minivan and starts looking around suspiciously. He then behind unloading garbage bags into my dumpster. It was suspicious behavior given the weather, so I went out and tore open one of the bags. It was filled with clean winter clothes. The other 3 bags were 2. It was at least an entire wardrobe of clean clothing that this guy came to a residential area to throw away during a blizzard. Went to Amsterdam with a few friends and tried truffles on our last night. Cut to my friend and I laid face down outside our room in the hotel's corridor watching people go by at around 6:30 am. We're watching and this guy comes from the end of the corridor, totally ordinary looking, carrying a briefcase, then takes a right by the elevator. A minute later the exact same freaking guy emerges from the same place and does the same thing. Walks towards us, then takes a right at the elevators and disappears out of view. I looked at my friend and she saw the exact same thing. She then wanted to go down to the end of the corridor to see what was going on, but my paranoia took over and I retreated straight back to the room. Frick that crap. Never did get an explanation for it. It might have just been a shared hallucination, but are they even a thing? A woman would always come into the store where I worked with a pair of gardening gloves and 2 big purses. She'd go through the discarded ATM receipts and write things in this little notebook. She would do the same with the prices of random merchandise. She would never buy anything and he would spend at least 15 minutes doing this nearly every day. My store manager asked if he could help her with anything exactly once and she literally snarled at him to leave her alone. When I started working at a completely different store in the area, I saw that she did the same thing. Not sure if she has a mental condition or if she's just really strange and likes to track the prices of things. Sounds like a mental health issue. Worked as a florist a few years ago and my boss was being paranoid about a briefcase laying on the sidewalk outside. I tried telling him that nobody was going to bomb a florist on a Tuesday in the middle of October with 3 employees inside, with 1 handicap employee whose mental age is 5. Nope. He called the cops. Bomb squad came. 7 police officers. My boss yelling bomb and my colleague, bless his sweetness, was singing erratic watering plants while clapping his hands together. The memory still gets me facepalming. Turned out it was an empty briefcase. My boss yelling bomb and my colleague, bless his sweetness, was singing erratic watering plants while clapping his hands together. This is straight out of Bob's Burgers. I saw a guy walking a lit Christmas tree on wheels down the sidewalk at 9 PM at night. Had it on a leash and everything. 2 girls carrying a canoe on the streets, like overhead style. They were in full sweater clothes at 30 Celsius outside and there was nowhere to canoe in for miles and miles and there is no outdoor shop near that place either. We went to a store and back and when we came back, the girls were on the side of the road, in the canoe, like they were in the water and flailing their arms around. It was 8 PM in the middle of the summer. Never understood that one. They bought drugs from the owl. You know when some people turn the volume of the car radio at maximum with some rap? I saw one with classic music at maximum volume enjoying it like a freaking metal song. Like headbanging and everything. Rock me, Amadeus. I was at a party in HS and watched as a guy walked up behind another guy and hit him over the head with a cinder block. The man who was hit got taken down to 1 knee. He then proceeded to slowly get up, turn and face his attacker and scream, "You need a tool to take me down, boy," all the while his face was red from pouring blood. The one that got hit proceeded to beat the other guy's butt. Well, that's freaking badass. I once saw someone on Halloween night walking their dog around 5 PM or so still light out, with black buttons in front of their eyes. They were keeping them in place using their cheek muscles, which gave them a very weird and super creepy grimace. I don't think they were otherwise wearing a costume. At first I thought the dog had the buttons on his eyes. My mother driving around our house, drunk and screaming. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to an engine revving right outside your bedroom window. We lived in the country. You open the blinds to see a truck doing donuts. Hellish. Demonic screaming and your dad runs out the door screaming and waving his arms. It was when my denial ended and I realized my mother had truly lost her mind. Yeah, I have some drunken mom stories similar to that I've tried to repress. Middle-aged woman looked normal in every way except she was brushing her teeth at the bar of a cafe, spitting into a bag, and using the water she was served to rinse and spit into said bag. All of this 30 feet from the bathroom. Germaphobe. You know how when there's a crowd of people waiting at a bus stop, they're all standing either sharply or at least slightly angled towards the direction the bus is expected to come from? There was probably about 15-20 people at the stop, University Town. Lots of students getting to morning class, all following this unspoken rule, except for one dude, wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, just facing the other way up the street, slowly eating a banana, almost sensually. I couldn't tell if he was making eye contact with me due to the sunglasses, but I felt like maybe he was, I dunno. Subtle, but still sticks in my mind. Looked like a glitching video game NPC. I do this a lot. It's just nice to look around sometimes. Probably the weirdest thing for a younger me, as I was about 8 or 9 at the time. For the most part my parents don't drink a lot. In fact my mom rarely drinks unless she's specifically going out for an occasion. But for this night it was their anniversary, so they decided frick it and got smashed. Arriving home around 11 I had woken up and could hear someone outside, so I took a look and spotted them. My mom holding an ice cream cone as my dad tried to lick ice cream. Having fun, she kept keeping it just out of his reach and they're just laughing until he decides frick it and just grabs the cone ice cream first. Looks at his hand as my mom is just dying laughing and starts eating it. Anytime I tell the story it never fails to get a laugh out of my mom. My dad forever denying the night he palmed a scoop of ice cream. Your parents still kept their youth. Good for them. Driving home from work through the poshest neighborhood in Atlanta with a really nice Mercedes in front of me. I keep hearing a metallic noise and I notice he is driving on 4 rims. The tires are completely gone. He wasn't swerving and appeared to be maintaining his lane. I backed off and followed him for several miles, driving around 40 miles per hour. Then sparks start coming off his wheels, and then flames. He still keeps driving. I called 911 and reported this but never saw the police. He finally slowed and turned onto a side road and kept going. Flames still coming off all 4 wheels. I never found out what happened to him. Rich people do drugs too. I saw a grown man take a lollipop, crush it under his feet, pull out the stick and eat the crushed candy. Then he opened up a tin container and I saw that it was full of crushed lollipop candy. I actually do this with warheads. Way back in the 90s I was the manager of a camera store, and it had been in the town I lived for 60 years or more, so we had long-term customers that brought film for processing. We had an old lady that would come and always wearing perfect white cotton gloves, not heavy cotton, thin cotton like a t-shirt. She was very thin and tall with a very wrinkly sweet face and grey white hair. She was always quiet and no matter the weather those gloves, as clean and white as could be, were always on her hands and a little old lady long coat. Hard to describe. The years go by and she comes in with no issues. Then we don't see her for a while and then end up reading in the paper that she had her mother's dead body in a room in her house and it had been there for at least 5 years. The old lady said that when her mother died in her sleep suddenly that she got scared and she didn't know what to do or who to call, so she just left her there for years in the bed she died in. I think the old lady was institutionalized or something. It was really sad. She was so sweet. Sad, poor thing. My band was on tour and we got caught in a mother of a blizzard just outside of Seattle, WA. There were a ton of cars that couldn't gain traction, were left abandoned, or otherwise stuck. At one point, we saw a group of monks helping people push their cars, like full-on monks, shaved heads and orange robes, in the middle of the interstate during a nasty blizzard in the Pacific Northwest. When I was in art school, there was a cemetery in the middle of the city dating from the 1800s about a block away that I'd go to for nature drawing. Very edgy, I know. Normally it was totally empty, but one time I saw an elderly man walking around and placing things down at grave sites. At the time I thought he was picking up trash. I looked up from drawing a minute later and he was totally gone without a trace, which was odd because he was slow and using a walker. As I got up to leave I noticed metal food trays on the ground and containers of soup sporadically throughout the cemetery, all in various stages of decay. I assume it was that old guy leaving food at various grave sites and not actually picking up trash, but that coupled with an old graveyard in disrepair and him disappearing so suddenly I never went back by myself. It was at a big festival in Denmark, Roskilde, in the late 90s. I saw a drunk man, crawling naked from the waist on all fours while taking a crap, much like a horse would. 10/10. Kinda long, sorry, but this is too wild not to tell in detail. When I was about 9 years old, my brother held his 12th birthday party in our basement, in which he invited like 7 or 8 of his friends over for a sleepover and video game marathon. Well, at one point late in the night I went downstairs to check out what they were doing because I was a curious little girl. Needless to say, I was very confused with what I was looking at, and couldn't comprehend what was happening for a few seconds. All of my brother's friends were penning one of the boys down to the bed, and for a second I thought they were tickling him because of all the laughing. But then I saw he was being held face down on the mattress. His pants were stripped to his ankles. and one of the boys hovering over him was holding something shiny. I watched in absolute horror as one of them pried the boy's butt cheeks open, and another was trying to push a light bulb into his butthole. The boy pinned down started screaming louder and louder, while all the boys around him were laughing. I was still in the doorway by the stairs, stunned, and turned to my brother, who was, very much in his style, playing a video game on the computer by himself, away from the commotion. He hadn't even registered the noise behind him or me, until I sheepishly asked, "What are they doing to him?" He looked at me and saw I was on the verge of tears, then looked back to see what was going on and whispered, "Oh my god," then quickly slapped his hands over my eyes, as if I hadn't already seen everything, before pushing me back up the stairs. He said that that's just how boys act and this is a normal boys sleepover, and forced me not to tell my dad, which I never did. I asked, "Is that what molesting is?" He said no. I listened to him, and I didn't go downstairs for the rest of the night. Now, 10 years later, I can still see it in my mind vividly, and wonder how it affected that poor boy who was held down. That's some Lord of the Flies crap right there. Taught elementary school, and my classroom was near where the kids went out to recess, so I'd hear snippets of conversation. One day, I heard these two little boys having a conversation. "If she doesn't like you back, that's her loss. You're like George Washington. You are George Washington. Yeah, I am George Washington." It was oddly inspirational. When I, female, was a teenager, I had a habit of walking home from the subway alone, late at night. The half-hour walk took me through a neighborhood of winding streets and mansions with huge lawns, which also bordered a ravine through which ran a large river. As a result of the big lawns and semi-wilderness of the area, there were large pools of darkness and sort of deserted parts. I recognized that I needed to keep my wits about me since there was a potential for danger, but I was never freaked out on my walks home, except once. One time, as I was walking home around 11:30 p.m. one fall night, a car drove towards me, windows down, blasting classical music. It was like a thing out of A Clockwork Orange, and spooked me so badly I ran all the way home. No idea what that was about, and they didn't talk to me or stop, but it was certainly strange. Driving to work, I saw a car in the highway median, completely upside down and pointed opposite of traffic. An elderly woman was standing next to it, just looking confused. The car had no damage as far as I could tell, and no other cars were stopped nearby, as if nobody else was involved, and nobody was helping. I've wanted to know the backstory behind what I saw for a very long time now. It didn't even look like an accident. It just looked like, I don't know, like maybe that's just something cars do if you push the wrong button. Being in the rave scene in the late 90s early 2000s, I saw a lot of weird stuff, but one that sticks out is a bunch of kids rolling hard and taking turns licking each other's eyeballs. That's how you get pink eye. A man was in the bathroom in a Walmart just standing, smiling, and staring at me while I pee and wash my hands. Creeped me out, man. Quit looking at yourself in the mirror while you're peeing in the sink. I could have sworn I saw a poodle driving a car on the highway while we were driving to Mexico. Had to be a dream, but it felt so real. I love that it was a poodle. They actually are supposed to be one of the smartest dog breeds, lol. I saw a police officer run down my street with a sledgehammer. I mean, he probably had a gun and stick thingy. Why would he have a sledgehammer? Where did he get it? Why was he running? Why didn't he just get into his cruiser with it? Very strange day indeed. I was 5 years old. In the middle of the night, I woke up and I saw my great-grandma in my room. My great-grandma and my grandma came here from Korea in the late 60s. My great-grandma never learned English. She was standing by my bed, talking to me in Korean. I do not and did not speak Korean. I blinked a few times and she was still there. When I turned on the light, she was gone. I assumed it was a bad dream, so I went back to sleep. The next morning my mom told me and my brother that my great-grandma passed away during the night. I was maybe 9 or 10 when my mom's best friend passed away from cancer. She said she woke up in the middle of the night and Tina was standing in the bedroom doorway, saying thank you, love you, some crap I can't remember. Whatever random time it was, when my mom looked at the clock was the exact time she was officially pronounced dead in the hospital. Driving on the HWY in the middle of winter once, my sister and I saw this pickup in front of sort of start drift in and out of lanes. Eventually he drifts off to the left side and into the center ditch straight towards the supports of an upcoming overpass. He drives more to the left, avoiding the bridge support, now on the shoulder of the oncoming side of the HWY, and at this point is going maybe 10-15 miles per hour, and all of a sudden we see the dude just sort of tumble out of the passenger side door and roll into the snow. We pulled over and ran to see if he was okay, but he got up and ran to his now stopped truck, whips a U-turn in oncoming traffic and takes off like nothing happened. We called the police and I guess they were able to find and arrest him. Apparently he was high as a kite on something. In 1976 I was 14. My family owned a small grocery store gas station in the Big Thompson Canyon. That summer we had a flash flood that killed 144 people. Before my family had to flee the rising waters, it was simply an incredible rainstorm to my sisters and I as we played in the downpour. Our store was at a Y in the canyon where two rivers came together. In the front the river was further away. In the back was a small creek closer to the house. A creek so small you could jump over it. My sisters and I went to play in the back. When we opened the door the water was up to the back door. It looked surreal, just unimaginable. As we stood there looking at the river we started seeing things floating in the water. Things swept from people's yards upstream, and then tents. Tents still up floating right by us. I'll never forget that. The tents calmly floating on the surface. Of course in an instant everything was panic. I saw and heard many things that night, but the strange calm of the tents will always be the weirdest thing to me. Maybe not weird, but cool. My dog growing up had been abused as a puppy by some jackass, and so he was extremely timid with anyone. One day he got slapped by a porcupine after getting too curious. It was bad. He looked like Pinhead's dog from Hellraiser. His face was so full of quills, he couldn't eat, and him being as injured as he was made him more skittish than ever. There was no way we could get him near a vehicle. That's a featuring we hadn't been able to accomplish his whole life anyways. My family was poorer than most, and we couldn't afford to have a vet come out. Besides, the vet would need to tranquilize him to even come close. We mentioned the problem to our closest neighbor, country folk, and he stopped by on his way into town to take a look. He also brought his dog, who he always took with him to town. Our dogs were best friends as far as dogs are concerned. So as my neighbor, my mom and I chatted in the porch. Our dogs stayed down in the front yard. Incredibly, the neighbor's dog walked in front of where my dog was laying down whining, and put his paws over my dog's paws while laying down. Over the course of the next half hour, we watched as his dog gently bit onto each and every quill before yanking it out. My dog would let out a little yelp with each tug and sometimes pull away, but the other dog had his weight on his front paws, making sure he held still. As fast as any vet could pull off, he yanked every quill. By far the coolest animal cooperation I've seen to this day. A grown adult lady pee in the lolly aisle of a supermarket, then mopping it up with a sanitary pad. If you're going to take a pee in a supermarket, pick a less popular aisle. We were driving home from Florida this summer and I was kind of napping when I heard my husband say what the frick, so I look out my window and there's a couch going past at about 50 miles per hour perfectly in the next lane. This is more funny weird, but years ago I worked as a receptionist for a government agency. We had something big coming up, possibly a major storm or something, so the district heads, directors, department heads were having these long meetings to prep. They took a break for people to grab updates, get a drink, etc. The director of my department, DOD, walks past my desk into his office. I have a direct line of sight into his office. I go back to working. A district head, RB, passes me, says something, then goes into the director's office. He comes back to me a second later. RB, where's DOD? ME. I thought he was in his office. Maybe the bathroom. RB talks to me for a minute. RB, call me when he comes back. I need to talk to him before we go back into the meeting. I see DOD in his office. I call RB. He comes up and the DOD is missing again. This goes on over and over again. The meeting is starting back up. DOD is in his office, then gone. I tell them I will come into the meeting to take notes to keep him in the loop. As I am gathering my stuff to go into the meeting, I see the department's director climbing out from underneath his desk. He was hiding under his desk to avoid going back into the meeting. He would pop up to do whatever, but when he would hear me call RB or someone talk to me, he would crawl under his desk. I'm rather impressed by his consistency. When I was in high school, I used to be part of the tech department for the theater. Basically, it meant that a bunch of friends and I would hang out after school and build the sets for the theater productions, in between goofing off and messing around. After some drama between me and one of the other techs, I left the tech department. About 3-4 months later, I walked into the theater during lunch as I was trying to sneak into the band room where my girlfriend was. When I walked in, the whole theater was blacked out, all house lights off, and on the stage were all the drama kids standing in a circle holding candles and chanting some weird mantra that sounded like Latin, but I didn't get to hear much of it. In the center of the circle, there was a taller person, who I assume was an adult, wearing a black cloak. As soon as the door clicked behind me, everyone in the group snapped their head to look directly at me, since I was clearly not supposed to have seen whatever they were doing. After a split second of thinking I'm about to be murdered by a cult, I bolted. I am sure there is a logical explanation for what I saw, but I choose to believe it was a sea-fueled occult ritual. For the record, all the drama kids were super weird and coked out most of the time, so I would not be at all surprised to learn they had performed animal sacrifices or some crap. Sounds like thespian induction. Also the grossest. We were sitting outside having ice cream in our town, and across the street is the city park. I saw 2 guys staggering around. It was mid-afternoon on a Sunday, I think. One guy just stopped, bent over and puked. The weirdest, grossest part happened next. The other guy laughed, bent down and licked the puke. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.